Hi guys, welcome to Pydjango-Tutorials. So as you know, in the last video, we have created a registration system and registration model and serializer so that user can register to our website using email, password, and bunch of other things. And as we have said in this video, we'll implement, or in the next video, we'll implement a login functionality. So that's what we will be doing in this video. But before moving on, I just want to give you a brief intro of what we will be creating in this video. So I have this email and password. So as we know, we have implemented a custom user registration. So we will be using email and password for authenticating user. So I'm going to come here and create a post request to login, and body I will be giving is raw JSON. Okay, so I want to log in this user. If I hit the send request, you can see that the message I'm getting here is login successful, and we are getting the token as well after login, and bunch of other data that we will be using later on, email and ID as well. And this email and ID is encrypted in this as well, in our token as well. So after decoding our token, we will get expiration date, next expiration date, email and ID as well. And we will use this token to uh, authenticate subsequent API request, so that after login we can authenticate that yes, this is the genuine reason and this is the genuine user and the request is coming from the genuine user, and we can proceed on with the request. So we'll do all these things using this token only. And other thing is, we have created a custom authentication class. We are not relying on any packages. We are just relying on Django REST framework, and every other thing has been built by us. So you get to learn something new, because most of the tutorials that you will find out here, or I would say many, even 99%, will teach you how to use packages like simple JWT and something like this. But in this, we will be building our custom class. We will be building custom methods to extract token from the header, to verify these token whether they are expired or not, to generate token using our data, and similarly to authenticate those tokens. Everything will be done by us. We are not relying on the default token authentication system of Django REST. We are not relying on any other packages. Everything throughout the course we will be building on our own, and in this way I think you will learn something truly meaningful. So considering this, let's get on with the video. And if you do like or want to support me in this, please consider do like, sharing, and subscribing. And please share as much as possible with your friends, family, whoever is learning or whoever is new to the technology. These are some awesome things we are building here. So why not everyone could learn something meaningful from this? So saying this, let's get on with the video. The very first thing we'll do is we'll set up a serializer for our login view. So I'll come to my serializer and I'll create a class called login serializer. I hope spelling is correct. Yeah, I'm gonna name it serializer, and first thing I'll get is email of the user. So serializers dot char field, or if this is email, we can take serializer dot email field. Then I want ID of the user, serializers dot char field, max length will be, let's say, 15, and this field only will be read only. We don't want anyone to write or update this ID, so we want this field to be read only. Then we want password of the user. So we'll say serializers dot char field as well. Max length we can give as 255, and this field will be write only. No one can read this. Then we'll implement a validate function. So def validate. So we can get email equals to, or we can name this as data. Then we can say data dot get. By the way, you can name attrs as well. So I just like to use data as the word here. That's why I've changed this. It's absolutely fine with whatever the name you are using. But in this data, you're actually getting the input data that user has entered. So I'm gonna get email key from that, or I'm gonna get a default value as none. So if email is present in the data, then I'll get the value of the email. If not, then I'll get value as none. Same I'll do for password as well. So password equals to data dot get password, and this will also be none. Then if email is none, I'm gonna raise a validation error, raise serializers dot validation error, and message I can give is an email address is required for login. Similarly, I can say if password is none, I'm gonna raise validation error as password is required for login. If this is not the case, that is user has entered email and password with the request, then we can authenticate this. So I'm gonna make authenticate. I have already imported authenticate here. So I can pass on username equals to email and password equals to password. Then if user is none, that is we cannot authenticate this user. That is this authenticate method does not return any user. You can see this function that Django has provided. So if user is present, they are returning the user. Otherwise, we'll get none as the user. So if this is the case, that is if user is not present, we can raise a validation error, raise serializers dot validation error, invalid email or password, something like this. Now, if this is not the case, that is one more check we can apply. If user dot is active, it should be if user, if not, that is if user is not active, we can raise a validation error again, validation error, user is inactive. Now, if all these checks are verified and there are no issues, then we can simply return the dictionary of this user. So we can return email as this user email, user dot email, comma. I want ID later on to encrypt this ID along with our token authentication or JWT token. That's why I'll return ID as well, user dot ID. So that's all. So our login serializer is complete. Now we can move on to implement a login view and a token system as well. So every time a login request is made, we want to generate a token using this email and ID. So and we want to return that token as well, so that later on for every subsequent request, user can use that token and we can identify the request in the backend using that token. So uh, with this we get to know that yes, the request is coming from the valid and genuine user, and we should output the response that user want. So we can move on to that. So very first thing we'll do is create a file called token authentication dot py, and we need certain things here. Now I already have this installed in my system, but if you do not, you have to install something called JWT. So you'll do pip install pydjwt. I already have this installed, but you might have to install this on your system. So make sure you run this command, and then I'm gonna name it, import it here. So I'm gonna import JWT. Then I'm gonna import. We want certain exception as well. So I'm gonna import from JWT dot exceptions, import invalid token error and expired signature error. Why we need this, I'm gonna tell later on in this code, but for now just import these important or necessary requirements. Also I'm gonna import from REST framework dot authentication, import base authentication. So this is the class we will use for generating our custom authentication system. Next we want REST framework dot exceptions, import authentication failed. That is, if authentication failed, then what happened. We also need Django's settings. So from django.conf, import settings. Similarly, from django.contrib.auth, we want our user model, import get user model. And we want to work with time as well. So I'm going to say from date time, import date time, comma time delta. So first thing, why we need the settings. So we know that our token is actually an encrypted token. So we'll use our project's secret key, that is settings secret key, to where it our settings. Yes, this secret key to actually to encrypt our token, and that's why we need settings in our file or in our token authentication. Now, very first thing we'll do is create a class. I'm gonna name it JWT authentication. I'm gonna inherit with base authentication. As I said, we'll use the base authentication class provided by REST framework to create our own class. Now, very first thing or very first function we'll create inside this class is to generate the token. And then we have to create a bunch of other function like extracting the token, authenticating the token, and all these. But the very first we need is generate token. So I'm gonna name def generate token, and this will take a parameter called payload. Payload will basically be all the data that we want to encrypt along with our token. So as I said while making serializer that we will encrypt this data. So we need to send this data to this function, and we will use this to encrypt. Along with email and ID of the user, we want to encrypt the expiration date or expiration time for the token as well. Because as we know in token authentication that every token expires after certain number of hours or certain number of days. In our case, we will keep this as 24 hours. That's what most of the community out there using. So we'll implement that only. So how we will implement, we will see here. So I'm gonna name expiration as date time dot UTC now, because our system is using UTC time. So I'm gonna get the UTC time and I'm gonna add 24 hours in this. So time delta dot 24. So we are adding 24 hours to this time. And in, as we know, our payload is a dictionary. You can see here our payload is a dictionary. So I can create one more key as exp, and I'm gonna add this here. Now to encode our token, we can say token equals to jwt dot encode, and what we want to encode is payload, then our key which we want to use to encrypt this. So that will be our settings dot secret key. Then algorithm, we have to tell the algorithm we want to use. So we'll use the default one, HS256. And then we simply want to return this token. Now this function will be a static function. This will be same for every object that we create. So we can say use a decorator here as well. This is just a good practice of oops. That's why I've used this. It's totally fine whether you want to use it or not. It's not like something changes, but this is a good practice to use this decorator. So we'll use this. Now moving along, we want to create next function. So our next function would be when request comes, we want to extract that token from the request. So our next function we'll create is extract token. This will take a request. So this will be self request. So in request, along with the request body or along with the request header, we will get token. In our case, we are looking for headers because in headers we will get the request. So first thing I'll get is header. So I'm gonna name it auth header, which will be request dot headers dot get, and we want to look for authorization. I hope spelling is correct. So this is the header we are looking, and from this auth header, first thing we'll check if this auth header is present, and auth header dot starts with, so this is a string function, bearer space. So we are looking for basically a bearer token in our request. So we will return auth header dot split with space, and we want to return the first element, or sorry, second element actually. Otherwise we will return none. So what is happening here? So first thing, we are getting the authorization header from our request, and that will be a string where string will start with bearer, and then if this is the case, that is we have the authorization header in which auth header is actually starting with bearer, then we will split it with a space, so basically this space, and we will return a second element of that index of that auth header. So if I have to give the example, then let's say our token will something like this. If this is our token in some encrypted form, then this is what our auth header authorization will look like. So if we split this with space, then a list will be generated. So our list will be something like this. So this will be one element in the list, and this will be second element in the list. So I'm returning the second element. So that is actually our token. And we'll see how we will send this request along with the header and all, but that's how we will extract our token. Now once our token has extracted, we want to verify this token. So for now, we will verify that this token actually has expiration header in it, so that we can identify that this token is not invalid or anything. And we also verify that uh, expiration time is not less than the current time, and is not greater than sorry, less than the current time actually. So we will create a function def verify token. This will be self comma payload. This payload is actually the token itself. Uh, then we will say if exp, this is actually the decoded token. So if exp in payload, this should be exp not in payload, then we will raise a invalid token error. That's why I've imported this. So here we can return token has no expiration. Okay. Now, if this is not the case, that is, we will get expiration timestamp. Then we can say we can get this. So payload exp. Now we will get a current timestamp. Datetime dot utc now dot timestamp. Now we can compare this. If current timestamp is greater than expired timestamp, then raise expired signature error, that is our token has expired. So we can simply return token as expired. Now our token has been verified. Then we can authenticate our user. So last function we will create is def authenticate. So this is actually the function which we have overridden from this base authentication. So first thing we'll get is the token. So we can say token equals to self dot extract token, and this actually take request. So we'll pass this request only. Request equals to request. If token is none, we will return none from here. If this is not the case, then we'll implement a try block. Try. First thing we'll do is we'll decode this token. So jwt dot decode. So first thing we'll want to give is the string that we want to decode. Is that string is token. Then we want to give the key that we have used. So this will be secret key. Then we want to tell the algorithms, list of algorithms that we want to try while decoding this token. So we know that this is HS256. Sorry, 256. So we want to try this. Once our token has been decoded, then we want to verify this. So self dot verified token, and we want to give this payload as payload. So this verify token, as we have created this, so this will check for expiration and return the appropriate error. If verification is done successfully, then we want to get the user ID from this payload. Now this key, as you can see, we are decoding email and ID as well, and that's what ID I'm getting here. So another thing we can do is user equals to user. Okay, we haven't created our instance of our user model. Okay, this will return the current user, and we can say user dot objects dot get ID equals to user ID. Then we can return this user. if we want to catch the exception, so we can catch actually 3 exception here: invalid token error, expired signature error, and user dot does not exist as well. Because there might be chance that ID we are getting in the after decryption is not actually the valid ID. So we want to return something in that case as well. So we can raise authentication failed error simply, field, and we can give simple message invalid token. That's all. So our JWT custom authentication system is completed. This is our file that will take care of all the authentication regarding APIs or the request. So there are some additional checks that we will apply later on, because right now we are not saving this token. So we cannot verify that this token is actually pointing to that particular user only, because there might be chances that our token can be verified from someone else's account as well. So because all we are doing is getting the ID, and if we get uh, uh, and if from that ID we are getting the correct user, we are authenticating this as correct. So there is no way of recognizing that this token is actually associated with this user or not. So that's we will apply later on, where we will store token along with the authentication system or along with our user model as well. So that's for later on. But right now our basic token authentication, custom token authentication along with expiry and all is done. So another thing we can do is there are some things we have to do in settings as well, where we have to tell Django or Django REST framework that instead our default authentication system will be the one that we have created. So in our settings, right after this, we can say REST framework. So these are the settings that will be related to REST framework, and the key we want to give is default authentication classes. This will be a list, and this will be accounts dot token authentication, and our class name is JWT authentication. So this is the way of telling Django REST that we want to use this authentication class that we have created for authentication purpose. So now our last step is left, that is we want to create a view for this so that we can send request and generate this token. So that's what we'll implement now. So I'm gonna create a login function. This will take request, and first thing is we want to apply this decorator here, and this function like register will also look for post request only, and this will be, so very first thing we'll do is define our serializer equals to, we have to import our login serializer. This will take request dot data if serializer dot is valid, that is all the checks have been passed and serializer is valid to proceed further, will generate a token. So we have to import from accounts dot token authentication, import JWT authentication. So we can actually, without creating object, we can call this function generate token, and as I've said, we want to send the data that we want to encrypt along with the token. So I'm going to send serializer dot data, and then once the token is ready, we can return response, and our response will be, first thing will be message login successful. Then second thing will return is token. That will be this token actually. Then last thing we want to return is user. So that will be serializer dot data. And along with this, we also want to return. So whenever something is created, so we can say status dot HTTP 01 created. Whenever something new is created, we are returning this. And if this is not the case, that is our serializer is not valid, then we can return response. Sorry, this should be response, and our response will contain serializer errors along with the status equals to status dot HTTP bad request or something. Yeah, 400 bad request. That is, there are some error along with the request, and we cannot verify, or something has been done wrong or not validated in our serializer. Now, all we have to do is register this here, and then we are ready to test this out. So I'm gonna import this. I'm gonna copy this, paste. This will be our login. This will be login as well, and here it will be. Let's give the name login as well. So we are ready to test this out now. So I'm gonna run our server python manage.py. First thing I have to do is come to my backend folder, python manage.py, run server. Our server is up and running, so let me just get the Postman. So we already have our user here, this ash@gmail.com. So let's try to register this user. If I hit the send request, so okay, so as we know, this user is already registered, so we can use this user to authenticate only. So this request will be post request, this will be login. Then I'm gonna get this data here, body raw JSON data, and then we want to beautify this, and this comma should not be there. Okay, we are ready to test this out. If I hit login, there is some error, so let's check this. Cannot call is valid as no data equals to keyword. Okay, so in our views we have to give data equals to request.data. Now if we hit the send button again, you can see we are successfully logged in. We have our token here, and if later on when we will authenticate our request with this token, we will get encrypted data after decoding, such as ID of the user, email of the user. And as you can see, while writing we are sending password, but while reading, serializer has taken care that password should not be along with the response, because of write only equals to true. And similarly, if let's say if we are giving ID as well, so let's say I'm giving ID as 6, and let's test this out and let's see what happens. Nothing happens, because this ID doesn't matter whether you're giving along with the request or not, because this ID is the read only field. It will not be write, it will not be updated in the database because of the validation that we have applied in our serializer. So you can see this is read only and write only. So I hope you understand what we have done, and later on we will use this authentication class that we have created for authenticating our different views or different subsequent requests, and we will use this authentication to authenticate our channels request as well, so that like in the previous WhatsApp clone, we haven't integrated a way to authenticate our channels views, and anyone from the JavaScript client can uh, communicate with our channels using WebSocket. We don't want that in this, so we'll implement a middleware to authenticate our channels so that anyone who is trying to connect to our channels using WebSocket is valid and genuine and can be connected. So we'll take care of all these things. This will be a project that you can use for something bigger, or something like you want to show off on your resume or anything. So this is the project where you can show that you have built something that is truly meaningful and you can use this. So like, will implement authentication, will take care of security, will take care of things that nobody can exploit our systems and all these things. So I hope you are learning something meaningful here. And if you do, please do consider like, sharing, and subscribing. That would be really helpful. Share it as much as possible. And now the videos or the consistency of video will be regular. So I'll try to post as much video as possible in a week or in coming days. So I hope so. Considering that, that's all for this video, and see you in the next, guys. Thank you so much for watching once again.